It's the honourable member for Calgary-Crowfoot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So sexual misconduct in the armed forces is a known, long-standing problem. It was known during the previous Conservative government, and the previous Conservative government received the Deschamps report, which recommended changes, some of which required legislation, in March of 2015. So the report was tabled, Mr. Speaker, and its recommendations are accepted just before the 2015 election. And if Conservatives had been re-elected in 2015, the legislative changes necessary to address investigations and prosecutions into sexual misconduct would have been taken care of 10 years ago, Mr. Speaker. But that's not how it turned out. The Liberals won the 2015 election, and during the entire 42nd Parliament, Mr. Speaker, the Liberals did absolutely nothing. They made literally zero effort to pass the legislation necessary between 2015 and 2019. But during the 42nd Parliament, I mean, we got to go through this, Mr. Speaker, to really figure out how we got here, where they're time allocating this bill today in 2026. During the 42nd Parliament, the Liberals' main contribution to the issue of sexual misconduct was to cover up for it. That's what it did when it touched the highest levels of the chain of command. Some will remember that Defence Minister Harjit Sajjan helped cover up known sexual misconduct by the then Chief of Defence Staff, Jonathan Vance, and along with some help from the Trudeau PMO. So after the next election in the 43rd Parliament, they still did absolutely nothing to implement the Deschamps report. They let new reports pile up, like the Fish report and the Arbour report, while a succession of senior officers continued to be publicly accused of sexual harassment. A third election in, they finally got around to tabling an earlier version of this bill in the spring of 2023. That was 8 years after the Deschamps report, and then they made almost no effort to move the bill in the House. It sat there collecting dust on the order paper for a whole year before receiving, I believe it was exactly 1 day of debate in the spring of 2024. Now, some are going to remember what the Liberals did in the fall of 2024. They sacrificed their entire legislative agenda in defiance of 2 orders of Parliament. They willingly did so rather than comply with rulings from the Speaker, finding prima facie evidence of contempt of Parliament related to the corruption of the Green Slush Fund and lies told about disgraced Minister Randy Boissonnault at committee and his conflicts of interest. That lost legislative session ended in the implosion of the Liberal cabinet, the resignation of the Prime Minister, the prorogation of Parliament, and it ended the Liberals' attempt, the first attempt, to legislate the changes recommended by Justice Deschamps. So Conservatives have always and continue to support the recommendations contained in the Deschamps report. We agreed with the recommendations when we were in government, and Conservatives agreed with them in opposition during the 42nd Parliament, the 43rd Parliament, the 44th Parliament, and now in the 45th Parliament. So, when the Liberals finally called this bill, they called C11 last December on a Friday, Conservatives allowed it to pass at second reading without even 1 full day of debate. And so now we have the amendments. The amendments we're debating was the result of the Defence Committee's work earlier this year. The Defence Committee heard brave, courageous testimony from victims of sexual assault, abuse, and harassment within the armed forces. They heard traumatic, harrowing experiences. And this testimony that was heard at the Defence Committee was given serious consideration. If the appropriate jurisdiction of investigations and prosecution is not a simple question. And it's true that Justice Arbour recommended all cases being referred to the civilian system. But it is also true that many victims expressed a variety of concerns about access to justice within the civilian system. That's why Conservatives, Bloc MPs, and even the NDP all recommended that the best way to give victims their best shot at receiving justice is to allow the victim to choose which system makes the most sense in their particular case. So the simplicity of this recommendation speaks for itself. Nobody in all of the inquiries, and there have been other inquiries and studies done at the Defense Committee, none of the inquiries, the studies, the parliamentary reports disagree that there are barriers to justice within a system where the victim and the accused are part of the same chain of command. Nobody is disputing this. But as was pointed out by witnesses during the committee's study, the civilian system is also riddled with barriers to justice for victims. Official languages is an issue. If a member can't get service in the official language of their choice in the provincial system of where they are stationed. Delay is another one, Mr. Speaker. So that's why the committee recommended choice. It is not forcing anybody to have their case studied within the military system. It is giving choice. So this committee study, during this study, no party had a majority. All the MPs worked together, regardless of their party affiliation. There were many amendments proposed, and there was very powerful and compelling testimony that drove these amendments. And so that's what Parliament is all about. Hear from the witnesses at committee and work together to recommend improvement to the legislation. That's good opposition politics. That's good government party politics. But we know that now everything has changed. The Liberals have a majority, and they've already demonstrated the contempt that they hold, with which they hold opposition MPs and ideas other than their own. In their arrogance and their unbridled hubris, Mr. Speaker, this Liberal government is ignoring the wisdom born of cooperation and collaboration. There were 14 amendments. They were all supported by multiple parties, and now they are intent on ramming this bill through that they spent, after spending almost 11 years, failing to introduce and pass it. So the member for Nunavut in particular, she contributed to this bill in a very meaningful, important way. This is what Canadians want to see. Her party didn't even have a seat at the committee table, but she as an MP produced a good, sound, principled amendment that was debated and adopted at committee. So Canadians say they want their elected representatives to be open-minded, they want them to work together, they want them to respect and cooperate with each other. That's what the Defence Committee did. They took seriously the amendments offered by an MP that didn't even have a vote at the committee. But between the clause-by-clause review at the committee and the present, today, when they now have a majority and have used time allocation to curtail debate on this, the member has crossed the floor and joined the Liberal caucus. So she had a history of principled opposition to government. She was one of the few NDP members that remembered that her duty was to oppose the government, not to hold the opposition party to account. So I hope that she will remember this and that she will not end up opposing her own contribution to this bill. Because she proposed the amendment that would allow choice and flexibility in cases of sexual misconduct in the military. She was doing her job, Mr. Speaker. So now that she sits in the Liberal benches, I hope that she will actually follow through and support her own amendment. But, she's not the only one. There are votes, there are those that have crossed. We now see the Liberals and their true colors: power at all cost, control at all cost, power concentrated entirely in the hands of the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister's contempt for Parliament as an institution is becoming obvious to all. I'm actually concerned about his limited civic literacy, Mr. Speaker, when he speaks in English and calls other MPs his deputies and sets up photo op signings pretending to sign bills into law. It's almost like he needed to be told that it's actually the Governor General that signs laws, not him, and that she only does so after they have been agreed to by a majority of members of Parliament of both houses of Parliament. And none of those members in either chamber are his deputies. So I'm disappointed that the government took 11 years to deal with a well-known and long-standing problem, and that they are proposing to gut this bill after such clear and powerful committee testimony. I supported the bill in principle and sending it to the Defence Committee. I support the conclusions of the Defence Committee, who made important amendments to fix this bill, and I oppose the Liberals' attempts to undo the committee's work by gutting out the amendments today.
Questions and comments. Question and commentary. The Honourable Chief Government Whip.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate his comments there towards the end about the use of the word deputy, which, as he knows, means member of parliament in French. But I'm curious, is he equally as concerned about the time the member from Brantford Brant stood up in this House in the middle of question period when he was responded to in French and he challenged the minister for responding in French, and he actually said, the member from Brantford Brant said, "I wish you had answered the question in English." He must be equally as outraged when that happened, correct, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Member for Calgary Crowfoot.
I think he completely missed the point. I'm not even sure. I wasn't speaking of the Prime Minister's use of French or English. I was talking about his use of the English word deputy when clearly characterizing his MPs as his deputies. He thinks that the Prime Minister thinks that the MPs of his party are his deputies, just there to do his work. They're elected by the people of Canada. All MPs are elected by the people of Canada. Nobody is the Prime Minister's deputy around here.
Commentary on
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague for the speech. I'd like to hear my colleague's thoughts on the government's attitude. This government was not elected as a majority government during the last general election, but now, thanks to floor crossers, the government is taking ownership of all the work that was done in committee for days upon days. Parliamentarians worked hard in committee. They heard witness testimony. There were amendments. Conservatives supported amendments to enhance and improve this bill, but now this government is literally throwing into the trash all the committee's work, doing away with the committee's work and doing away with the people's will, because the people voted for consensus in the House, not for a majority government. So does my colleague agree with the government tossing aside all the amendments that the committee consensually supported?
I agree with what the government is doing, and I thank the member for the question and for the way he put it. That's exactly what we've seen and what is happening today. This government is undoing the work of a parliamentary committee that did good work on behalf of Canadians, MPs from different parties cooperating with each other, producing sound, principled amendments to actually deal with a real problem, and now the Liberals are undoing that work because they can.
questions and comments. Question and commentary. The Honourable Member for Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleague from Calgary Crowfoot for his great intervention and to do a bit of a recap on the history, including pointing out the fact that in the previous Conservative government back in 2014, when sexual misconduct was becoming a major issue, commissioned Justice Deschamps to write a report that then sat on the Liberal minister's desk, Harjit Sajjan, who was in the process of trying to cover up the sexual misconduct of the former Chief of Defence Staff, John Vance. And the Liberals would rather cover things up than actually deal with the issues. And they ignored the 9 great recommendations from Justice Deschamps. As a point of interest, Justice Deschamps showed up on the committee's study on Bill C-11. They always talk about Justice Fish appearing. He did appear as well, and then also submitted a written submission. All of them said that that choice is an option. The only justice that didn't show up, that the Liberals continue to use their shield, is Justice Arbour. And she didn't show up at the committee. She didn't defend her report, and that report has now been discredited by the testimony that we heard from veterans themselves, including the military justice system. So I just asked my colleague, why won't the Liberals listen to veterans and military experts rather than just try to push through on their own political agenda?
A member for Calgary Crowfoot in about 45 seconds or less.
Yeah, I have no idea why. He's asking why they are doing this, why they are choosing to ignore all the testimony, choosing to ignore the substance of really all 3 reports. I mean, Justice Arbour's report, nobody is saying that sexual assault and misconduct cases must stay within the military justice system. Nobody is recommending that. So I've no idea why they are ignoring all of the witness testimony that they heard, and why they spent 11 years not solving and not dealing with the problem of legislation for dealing with misconduct and the sexual misconduct in the armed forces.